this year's Wednesday webinars. We didn't have one in January. We had a bit of a break, lots of things going on, lots of organisation, which hopefully from the little PowerPoint at the beginning, you should have seen that we've got a lot happening this year. And I will highlight some of that in a minute as well. If you're new to Wednesday webinars, then welcome. Thank you for coming along to see us. These are free webinars. We run them on usually the third Wednesday of every month, except for the August summer holiday. But if you haven't been to one of them before, much welcome. And then if you are old hats, then which I'm lovely to see some old hat faces popping out. Hi, Sarah, and welcome back. So, as you saw from the PowerPoint, there are a number of events that you need to put in your calendar. We have got our Shropshire event, the roadshow in Weston Park at the end of this month. We've got another roadshow up in Newcastle in Scotswood Garden in the end of March. And then the big one, we've got our national FSA conference, which is happening in Walesby in Nottinghamshire. The same weekend it usually was. That's the last weekend in September. So those 3 dates, make a note of them. I think Mimi, who's on tech stuff today, is going to put them in the chat, the link to the roadshow bookings. If there's, I believe there's still tickets, there's still time to book to go and see some amazing workshops in a slightly more small and intimate setting than the national conference, but then the national conference as well to put in your diary. Bookings for that is not open yet, but obviously keep a close eye on our socials because we've been advertising for all sorts of things, and we will continue to fill the airwaves with that. I think that's all the FSA news, other than I'm Matt, I'm the chair of the FSA, and I've been doing Wednesday webinars, running them and organising them for about 5 years now, and this is the very first one that I've actually had to speak to and present myself. So do forgive me, the topic is quite meaty, so I have quite a bunch of notes that I will be referring to, and I hope that's not too distracting for people as well. Please feel free, if you have questions, to put them in the chat, and if we have time, we'll come back to them at the end of the evening. Now, if you just excuse me whilst I try and then sort out sharing my screen from a different PowerPoint. Okay, can everyone see the PowerPoint? Lovely, perfect, excellent. So yes, like I said, I'm Matt. I'm the chair of the FSA, and I am also a classroom teacher. I've been working in mainstream schools for over 20 years. I've been 16 years in the classroom until last July, when I finally made the shift to go full time with my forest school business and outdoor learning business. So I am experienced with mainstream education, and this is another aspect of mainstream education that I'm really passionate about, getting children within schools access to forest school. The title is slightly misleading, I'm afraid, of this. It's quite long and we had to shorten it down. So actually what we're going to be talking about is the Education Inspection Framework, which is the EIF bit. That's the Ofsted Inspection Framework. And the Francis Review is the informal title for what we're going to be talking about. It's actually called the Curriculum and Assessment Review 2025, which is a bit of a mouthful. And also, that's one part of what we're going to be talking about. So Professor Becky Francis, who wrote it in conjunction with the government, but there is also a Department for Education response to that as well. So there's 197 pages of her review and recommendations on that, and there's also 67 pages of the government's response. So throughout this evening, I'll be referring to both parts of those, both her recommendations and the responses, and where possible, I'll try and differentiate. However, there are crossovers, there are things that make sense coming from her, make sense coming from the government, and some that just don't make sense at all. The Education Inspection Framework we're going to tackle first. It has had more publicity. It's a bit more well known for those people working in schools So apologies if you are already familiar with some of the things that we're going to be talking about the education inspection framework and the new changes from Ofsted. It was published in September last year, but then implementation was from November. And you may have been working in some of the schools that volunteered to take part in the initial trials of that inspection framework, in which case you're very, very lucky. But most people, most schools will be starting their inspections under this new framework from this term just started. So yes, apologies if you are someone that knows a little bit about the inspection framework already. Some disclaimers. The content of this evening is not necessarily always going to be directly linked to forest school or outdoor learning, but it is an opportunity to look at a little bit more of a wider context of what's happening in education and with education frameworks at the moment. There is a big shift, and that will have some form of impact on the landscape of mainstream settings where a lot of our forest school practitioners work. So it's worthwhile being aware of that as an environment in which things are happening. And it's also to provide a little bit of information to support practitioners as they advocate for doing their forest school within those settings and outdoor learning as well. So let's tackle the education inspection framework. I think first it's really important we look at why it was reviewed. There are lots of reasons why this framework was reviewed. It was actually down to be reviewed, written in the strategy document, the 2022 to 2027 inspection strategy document published by Ofsted. So that's primarily why they are saying that they have reviewed the inspections. It's also in response to a consultation called the Big Listen, which Ofsted put out in March to May of 2024, where they were getting a lot of information from feedback from staff, feedback from parents about the inspections and what schools and what parents wanted from their inspection frameworks. And then there was a part to do with the unfortunate and sad case of Ruth Perry. So the head teacher, that there was a little bit of waiting from mental health elements and the fact that there may have been a contribution to her stresses from a particular investigation inspection. So those are the main reasons why the structural changes have been reviewed and have been brought into play now. The main one, which most people may have heard about, is that there is now no longer an overall grade for education settings underneath what the last four terms on the left there. So instead of an overall judgment on the setting, instead there are separate areas which are then given one of 5 points of grading scales on the right of your screen there. So no overall judgment, but each of those different areas is given one of those 5-point grade scales. And that was explained that it's to give a little bit more specific feedback to both the people in the setting and to the parents reading the reports about the narrative of those settings, rather than it being rather a bit of a blanket statement. So the areas differ from earlier settings to mainstream schools. I'll give you a moment to digest those two lists, but it's really important that we can see the first two, safeguarding and inclusion. They are the top of the list and they are the priorities. And that links to something that I'm seeing from a lot of the different policies and the government giving a much more focused look at both safeguarding and inclusion in a lot of their documents and a lot of their policies and strategies that they're coming out with at the moment. And we'll pick that up a little bit later on in the Francis review as well. The idea was that these different areas were to reduce workload for the settings. So limiting down the number of different areas where the inspection was going to look into stuff, it's sort of given it a little bit more of a defined structure of what they're going to be looking at in that regard. So inclusion and well-being, as I said, they are strategically important to the government at the moment. I think they are focusing a lot on inclusion, not just for diversity and multiculturalism, but also in terms of special needs, and making sure that there is equity and equality as much as possible. Equality of access is a big thing as well. So the report card terminology which has been shared about is just an explanation of those different areas and how each of those areas is going to be graded, and allows a little bit more of a narrative style for those inspectors to give a bit more context to what's going in those settings. The other key change is, as it says there, the removal of the ungraded inspections. So they were called Section 8 inspections, and they have been completely abolished. So there aren't going to be any of those at all now. There are some other changes. So early years changes are going to be brought in April 2026. There are some changes to the early years inspection framework. And the main one is that it's going to go from 6 years between inspections to 4. There are going to be first inspections after registration between 12 and 18 months from registration, rather than it used to be up to 30 months. And then, as with the other parts of it, the inspection framework for mainstream schools, there's the option to have someone called a nominee, who is a dedicated liaison with the inspectorate, and that's meant to allow for a little bit more conversation between the inspectors and a member of the staff or a representative of that setting, to ease off the pressure a little bit with other people inside that setting. Another really lovely thing is that the abolishment of deep dives. So the deep dive methodology has been got rid of as well, in order to allow a little bit more time for inspectors to talk to the SLTs and to the pupils. And that is a really specific thing that they have said that they're looking to do, spend more time with the staff and pupils. For schools, the routine of timings is likely to be about the same, so once every 4 years, but that removal of the Section 8 is going to obviously have a little bit of an impact on that as well. They also have said about schools where they are getting requires or needs attention or urgent improvement, they will have sooner inspections, as was the case with the previous inspection framework as well. The other great thing that they have tried in the initial round of the volunteer inspections was the expectation that the Ofsted inspectors left the school or the setting by 5 p.m. on the first day. And that wasn't always happening. That wasn't always the case. As before, Ofsted inspectors are having mental health training. They're required to postpone or to amend the inspection if there are signs that it is causing undue mental anguish or harm to the staff. If you have any questions about this, I will put links to all of the documents that I've gone through on this and send those out with the edited version of this webinar. So you can read all of that information yourself and digest it slowly, because it's taken me quite a long time to get through most of it. Okay, let's move on to the curriculum and assessment review with Professor Becky Francis and the response that the DFE said in return to that. So I am going to treat both of these sort of as interchangeable. I'm going to chop and change between them, but I'll try and highlight which are the bits that have been recommendations from Becky Francis and which are the DFE response. I thought I'd share this with you because this is really lovely. This is a quote from the recommendations. It says, for those of you that are on your phones, we also value the holistic ethos of Key Stage 1 and broader primary education. Here, learning and social behaviours are developed Literacy and numeracy skills are established, and other subjects are introduced, encouraging a love of learning and enabling success. Children and their parents and carers tend to be happy with their primary education, and it is important that we preserve this. That's the only time in all of the nearly 260 pages that it mentions holistic learning. But I'll get into a little bit more about that in a bit. But it was lovely that there is a recognition that holistic learning is crucial. Interestingly, I've searched all of those documents, and there is nothing on play except for the expectation to learn one Shakespearean play and to play musical instruments. There is nothing on risk awareness except within computing and the risk of AI. And there is nothing on outdoor that isn't tied to PE within the review, or there is in the review, it says that there is a recognition that within primary settings, it's unlikely that outdoor and adventurous activities are either done not very well at all or not done. I don't want to give you any spoilers, but there's slight difference with that in terms of the DFE response, and I will come back onto that. So current curriculum links. Now, it's really important to say that Forest School, and taking the Forest School approach here, there's been a brilliant new guidance note on planning come out from the FSA with a really clear and excellent message that Forest School is not, it doesn't have curriculum drivers. And I think that's really, really crucial. Those of us that work in mainstream settings, we have to be able to stick to our guns about not allowing curriculum drivers into our Forest School practice. That's not to say, though, that we can't use curriculum objectives to label organically emerging learning. So there are curriculum links which in a natural occurring Forest School session where there is no clear directed curriculum intent, some things may organically crop up which link to certain aspects of the curriculum, learning about insects, learning about plant life, social, emotional objectives that are within the national curriculum that we can then label as they come out. But it's really important that we're advocating for Forest School and then advocating for the way that we label that learning in terms of curriculum objectives rather than it becoming the driver for our sessions. And that is a very, very slippery slope. But having curriculum links inside the Forest School sessions or labeling those or using those as a framework for assessment, there are opportunities for that. And as we get into the new curriculum, which I'll talk about in a minute, we're making a lot of assumptions, but in the recommendations, there are recommendations that would sit well with our desire to get children connecting a little bit more to nature. So let's look at some of these recommendations. Some of them are very much aligned with Forest School and outdoor learning and trying to get children connecting with being outside, and some of them might be a good little hanger to hang on some of our learning and the way that we explain children's progression of learning. One of the recommendations was the integration of a new oracy framework. So those children that really struggle with writing, an oracy framework will be beneficial in terms of giving them some assessment of their vocal and their oral skills. Things like storytelling may form part of that. There's been a big thing about, as I said, inclusion being part of the education framework, the inspection framework, sorry. And inclusion and diversity is a big thing in terms of the programs of study. So one of the recommendations was that diversity and modern society was much better represented within the programs of study. In fact, there's been a recent news article about how children are not engaging with reading at a higher level because a lot of the books and texts that are studied are not at the moment reflective of our modern society. There was a Sky News article from the campaign group Lit in Colour, if you want to look at that. There was a recommendation that the national curriculum become a digital document that teachers can access and plan a bit better from. That's been accepted by the DfE. There's also been a recommendation to develop guidance on curriculum and pedagogy adaptations for children with SEN. So that's also been accepted by the DfE. And teachers to be involved in the design of those programs of study. Ambitious but teachable. One of the big things in the review was it said that there was an understanding that there's a lot to fit in with the curriculum, and there was a call for horizontal coherence. So not doing the same thing multiple times across multiple subjects when better curriculum links across those subjects could be made. Observation for learning was another recommendation, that teachers should be allowed to do observations as part of their assessment. That happens a lot in the early years, and the understanding is that it is also valuable within the latter parts of the school system, even up to school colleges and GCSE levels. So using that type of observation skills, which we as forest school leaders are doing all the time, understanding that that is a valid assessment method is quite a step forward for the government, rather than it all being on testing. If you're interested in the changes to curriculum tests, in the document there's a lot of stuff about that. It's not necessarily relevant to outdoor learning or forest school, but it is interesting if you work in those types of settings. It's also, like the education inspection framework, allowing for a lot more narrative description of learning. So rather than it being very, very summative, being able to explain the contexts behind that learning progression seems like it's a good thing. And that links then to the oracy framework as well. There's a big push to understand teachers as professional and professionally autonomous as well. So understanding that teachers have the ability and the qualification to be able to manage the way in which subjects are learned. Now, this is probably more linked to outdoor learning or learning outside the classroom, but it is a good step forward that the government are understanding that we can teach lessons outside in terms of curriculum lessons, and that there is value in that as well. So these are the proposed changes to curriculum content. We don't know, obviously, the ins and outs of that quite yet. It is due to be published at some point next year, and then we'll get a much better idea about what it is. But the clear recommendations and that have been accepted are these four aspects of the curriculum content. Interestingly, as well, I think for us, the biggest thing is that it is now mandatory, or it will be when this comes in, mandatory to teach about climate change education from primary level. At the moment, the curriculum only briefly touches on it at secondary school level, but now it is expected that it becomes part of primary learning as well. Sustainability as well. And enrichment, which is a big bit of this slide and leads me very nicely onto the DfE response. Oops. So the DfE says, we will set out, can't see that, sorry. We will set out a core enrichment offer that every school and college in every community should aim to provide for all children beyond what is expected in the classroom, which I think is a big thing for them to say. I'll let you read the rest of that yourselves. So I've highlighted the bit where it says we're working with sector experts, and I did a bit of a dive into who those sector experts are. And it turns out that they are a group of charities and trusts, including the Duke of Edinburgh charity. Interestingly enough, the Duke of Edinburgh charity organised a bit of a research project last year in February, which suggested that every child should have 80 hours of enrichment activity per year. Now, I don't know what the government have said about that number, but if they are working with sector experts and the sector experts are the Duke of Edinburgh and various other charities and trusts who have published that research, it would make sense to me that that is something that they are looking at. What is the amount of hours that each setting, each school is meant to be providing in terms of enrichment activities? And at the bottom there, it just says, it lists those activities, those enrichment activities, which I've got down here. So I'm just going to emphasize again, this is from the DFE, and they have said that it will be mandatory for schools, colleges, earlier settings to offer these 5 enrichment activities. So the civic engagement, arts and culture, nature and adventurous. It's nature, outdoor and adventurous activities. So it's called NOAA as an acronym for that. That's what we're interested in, the nature, outdoor and adventurous activities. Sport and physical activities, which is separate, and that is amazing that sport and physical activities are separate from that adventurous activity, and then developing wider life skills. So talking about outdoor learning and outdoor activity, the Education Endowment Foundation is a charity some of you may be aware of. They publish data on a range of aspects and the impact that they have, the cost, the evidence base, and the impact that they have on children's learning. The CEO of the EIF is Becky Francis. So there's an interesting link there. But this is what they say about outdoor and adventure learning. Just that bit at the bottom is a little bit grating for me. So it says evidence strength rated as very low or extremely low due to a limited number of studies meeting inclusion criteria. Only 6 studies in the toolkit were identified and none were independently evaluated. So if we look at this in context, in terms of the Education Endowment Foundation, they say that there's no evidence or low evidence for the benefits of outdoor learning. And yet, the DFE have said it is one of the categories of enrichment that should be mandatorily available to all children in all mainstream settings. So there's a little bit of a clash there in terms of, the way that they're looking at it. And I think in terms of us as the FSA, working with IOL and various other outdoor centres and outdoor organisations, we have a way that we can then change that. So at the moment, the FSA is represented in an outdoor learning stakeholders group. We have meetings fairly regularly. It's chaired by the IOL, but we also have members of HOEC. We have members of the National Youth Strategy that come and talk occasionally. And last time we met, we had Tim Farron MP as well, talking about what he is doing in terms of outdoor learning within the curriculum and within government. The FSA, we've done a symposium. We did a symposium of gathering evidence. We have Netta, which is our app that we're working on, all to try and get this evidence, the evidence strength. And I think that we should be, we should be trying to pull together as an outdoor learning sector to try and make these links between Becky Francis writing the review, being chair of the EIF, who says that there's low evidence, with the DFE saying, you know, enrichment is really important and we should have everyone having access to nature, outdoor and adventurous activities. So there is stuff that we can do, and there is stuff that is happening. And I'm cautiously optimistic. I am very cautiously optimistic that things within outdoor learning are changing. Some of you may be aware that in December last year, the Scottish Parliament voted through a bill on residential learning, so that children in Scotland have a right to, I think it's 4 nights and 5 days of a residential activity. And that was highlighted at our outdoor learning stakeholder group, that it was really important that that has happened and that has been passed through in the Scottish Parliament. There's also really big stuff happening within the National Youth Strategy in England, again, focused around inclusion, focused around equity of access, which we know is tricky for some different aspects of our cultures and societies, to have access to outdoor learning and outdoor activities. But it seems to be aware, because it's happening, it's cropping up in every single one of these different policy documents. And the value of nature, outdoor and adventurous activities seems to be more highly regarded in terms of what the government is putting out at the moment. So, like I said, I am cautiously optimistic. In terms of the implementation of these frameworks, the education inspection framework is already being used. So as of November, it was being trialed, and as of January, it is now the only inspection framework. Like I said, that there are some changes to the early years inspection framework, which were coming in April, but for most mainstream settings, then it is already happening. The revised curriculum is due to be published the spring of next year, which will give teachers and senior leadership teams the chance to have a look through that new curriculum before implementing it in September 2028. So that's the implementation of this review and the DFE response to it. I just thought I'd bring it back to Forest School, because we are the FSA, so we are looking at Forest School and how we could link those things that we've discovered about the new curriculum framework with Forest School. So climate change is now mandatory. Nature, outdoor and adventure activities links to nature experiences, and also to some regard, the way that teachers are allowed autonomy about teaching certain aspects of nature. Like I said, Forest School sessions aren't curriculum driven. However, labeling some of those opportunities of learning when they're taking place in a natural environment seems to be a good way of labeling it. Holistic, the government have acknowledged that holistic education, certainly in Key Stage 1 and primary, is good. So excellent. Also, that broader curriculum, life skills. Life skills is one of those other enrichment areas. So there's an understanding that we don't all have to be academic. There is, if you're really interested in the assessment side of things, there is the proposal to bring in V levels, which are vocational equivalents of GCSEs. There hasn't been a lot of information about that yet, but the fact that the government are discussing non-academic or less academic subjects at GCSE level seems to be a move in the right direction. They've also scrapped the English baccalaureate, so allowing a little bit more value to be spread across arts and humanities and other subjects, not just focusing on the English baccalaureate set of subjects, and that equity of value. In terms of being professionals, there's professional autonomy, there's choice of delivery, learning methods, opportunities encouraged for that relevant outdoor learning. So that mainly relates to learning outside the classroom or outdoor learning rather than Forest School. However, it is getting children outside, and the government showing that they are valuing that. Community, there's compulsory citizenship and the curriculum being redesigned to be more reflective of modern society, because there has been a lot of stuff about children not engaging because they don't feel it's relevant to them. There was something on TikTok and how TikTok is able to engage children in a slightly different way. So if you're interested in that, just look up TikTok and modern reading, and that should give you a bit more information about that. And then this long-term side of things, the enrichment, those 5 areas of enrichment are mandatory from early years up to college. So the fact that that is coming through is, I think, a cause for celebration, really, that we are seeing a government that is understanding the value of nature and outdoor activity from early years up to 18. So that is good. Like I said, not much about risk in terms of what we do within forest school sessions, but forest school could be an activity that would be recognised as part of this NOAA enrichment aspect. So what are the next steps? Well, there's stuff that we're doing already. Like I said, the FSA is part of the Outdoor Learning Stakeholder Group, and we're talking to members and representatives of National Youth Work and Tim Farron, various other people. There's the Nature Premium, which is, as some of you may be aware, advocating for getting funded time for nature within schools. In terms of engagement with academic research, we've had the symposium, we've got NETA. There's lots of stuff that we can be doing. There's lots of stuff that we should be doing to try and further this evidence base. If you want to do any more reading around this, then I would really recommend reading the National Youth Strategy, which was published in December. Again, inclusion is a big thing. Equity of access, particularly to outdoor spaces, particularly to vocational stuff, is a really big thing, pushing that. And the Raising the Nation Play Commission have published a report recently as well, emphasising the need for play. I was slightly disappointed. I will say that play wasn't mentioned more within the review, but I could also take that they seem like they are happy with the amount that is going on. I did speak to one head teacher about this, and he said that he was happy with it, but it wasn't quite radical enough of a change. And I'm going to leave you to read the documents. I'll put all of the documents here, and they'll be linked to the webinar when we send it out as an edited video for you to watch. But if you want to read them, it is an interesting read, even if you're not directly working within classroom education. Just being part of those settings, it is interesting to see how this is going to shift, how this is going to change the way that people value what we do in terms of being outside with the children. Does anyone have any questions? That was a lot of information thrown at you. And I will do my best to answer as much as I possibly can. Obviously, there's 260 pages worth of information on just the review and the DFE response, and I have gone through all of it. And where possible, I've tried to make links to the outdoor education bits. Oh, thanks, Helen.
Thanks, Matt. That was really good stuff. It's frustrating that it's not what they're thinking about is not interdisciplinary enough yet for our needs, but it's clearly better than it was.
It isn't. I think that is the big shift. That the big thing that I'm taking away from it is that they have made it mandatory that children are given access to nature. whereas before that hasn't. And as the review said, it hardly outdoor and adventurous activities were either not being done in primary or they weren't being done well enough. And the sector is being consulted apparently on the benchmarks for that enrichment. So what those benchmarks will be, we have yet to see. Where do we count forest school as outdoor and adventure learning? I think if it's outdoors and it's risky, then that is outdoor and adventurous.
Oh, that I was saying the opposite, Matt. What I was saying is don't count it as that because you don't want to be put in the same pot as the assault course lot that have not got very good evidence. Whereas I think from what I've had a quick look at, there is a lot of evidence out there about forest school,
I think
and it
there
would be
is.
nice to position it separately with maybe like a desk review of the evidence
Yeah.
that's available.
There is, and part of the level 3 qualification is to study bits of forest school research. So for every person that's going through that level 3, there is an analysis of forest school research. So it is there. It's just it isn't being accessed by the right people in the right way.
There is a PhD student at the moment, which her work is clearly predicated on doing just such a desktop review. She's published 2 academic papers so far. I suspect we're probably going to be getting more from her. Hopefully that's going to be influential.
Yeah.
Because it is peer-reviewed stuff. It is out there at the top of the research tree, if you like, for what is credited as being creditable.
Okay,
And
I just put one in the chat actually as well with some other work that's being done. It looks like it's with Loughborough and London Met and Southampton.
yeah.
London Met is who I did my PhD with, and Loughborough is one of my colleagues, Janine Coates. She was part of the academic committee for the symposium, and she's level 3 trained, which is great. I mean, to have an academic at that level who is level 3 trained is really good stuff.
Yeah. And this is where people like the FSA and the Outdoor Learning Stakeholders Group, we need all of this information so that we can feed this back. The symposium was brilliant. I've had lots of people asking about having the summary for the symposium because it was such a good collection of academics all talking about forest school.
And it is available on the website, isn't it?
I believe so, yeah. The summary document is, yeah. Yes, Cheryl, we could do with the EIF doing a review of evidence on forest school and on outdoor learning and outdoor adventure examples. Yeah, absolutely. This is something that came up at the outdoor learning stakeholder group, was that having us all bunched together, no one quite understands what that terminology means. And there is one of the devolved nations, and forgive me, I can't remember which one it was, that is starting to have, I think it was Wales, is starting to have a glossary on what outdoor learning means, and then separating those into the different aspects of outdoor learning, of which forest school is one. So I think this is why I said I'm cautiously optimistic. It seems like it's a step in the right direction, that there is more value being attributed to being outside, that the government are aware that nature and outdoor and adventurous activities exist. And I think for us as practitioners and for us as organizations that are representing those areas of learning, it's really, really crucial that we are able to stand up and be specific about what it is that we do and the benefits that it has. We do need to be generating more research ourselves, Sarah. Yes, you did a lovely webinar a couple of years back on doing some data and research, and I remember from that you were saying about contacting and getting in touch with academics at the local universities and seeing we've got data. And this is another, this is why we're looking at doing Netta as the tracking app. That's a way of generating data from.
I think Netta could be really powerful like that, because not everybody who's doing forest school work wants to be bogged down with research. But on the other hand, they are de facto collecting data that academics who have to do research in order to preserve their jobs could be using. It's a natural symbiotic relationship, if only we can get it going.
Absolutely. Anna, I agree. I think too many people do still think that forest school is curriculum-based outdoor learning. And that's why there's a video on our YouTube channel, I believe, which is about the different aspects of outdoor learning. I think Nick did a really lovely job of looking at a branching out tree of different aspects. So with the Scouts, with learning outside the classroom, with other outdoor activity, field studies, all those different things. Interestingly enough, looking through the new recommendations on geography, there was very little on field skills. So again, we can only make assumptions about what this new curriculum is going to open up. But yeah, you're right, that people still equate forest school to either short amounts of time, just taking children outside, or being very directive. Cheryl, hello.
Sure, I've got a question about money.
Yes, okay.
So I'm thinking, I work for a school, primary school, and I know their budget their struggles quite well. And I can see, any kind of provider of any kind of thing is going to be looking at this and going, right, how do I make my case? Because limited budget, I need to make sure they spend the money on me rather than something else. So there were two kind of questions I had. One was, you said that there were those 5 areas where enrichment needed to happen.
Yes.
Was there any steer on it has to hit all 5 of those? And does that have to be equal amounts? Or could it be, for example, that you end up with all the PE sports gang get the big piece of the pie? And the other thing was, I wondered if the FSA has any kind of, not the academic stuff, but the evidence-based kind of briefings that are really plain English and make an economic case for, if you're going to spend £1,000 or £2,000 doing enrichment, this is what you'll get from forest school, so that they can make that argument.
So first question, it doesn't say specifically about those 5 areas. It just says those 5 areas are the ones that are mandatory. The benchmarks are being discussed. The government say that they are keen to make sure that it is equity of access and inclusion again, and understanding that there are some parts of the country that naturally do outdoor learning, forest school, learning outside the classroom better than others, and having that sector-wide benchmarks for what enrichment means. That's what they're consulting on at the moment. So there isn't any guidance at the moment about what that means, or what those 5 different areas are in terms of timescales or weighting. My hope would be that they are equally weighted. And my hope would be that they take the Duke of Edinburgh recommendation of 80 hours per child per year of enrichment activities. Second thing about advocating for forest school, the best advocate we've got is the forest school book, the Growing a Forest School from the Roots Up, because in there are it is directed at not only forest school practitioners looking to set up within schools, but it's also, there's aspects of that book which are for schools, and looking at those bits. There's also a lot of research on the Nature Premium website, which isn't necessarily just related to forest school, about advocating for that approach. So you should definitely have a look at that website as well.
Okay. Do you think that would have something about like the economic case for it, like why it's really good value for money in comparison to something else.
I
Because I
think
think that's the kind of thing that the people holding the budget are going to be really concerned with.
They do, and
Mm.
that's why I think in terms of the advocacy for what we do, we've got to be able to show the value.
Mm.
I'm
We've got
hoping to do a workshop at the conference about observations and how we can use different observational techniques to show how we hit more than one of those enrichment targets. Because I think if we can show that as a forest school activity, we can hit more than one, hopefully all five, through our observations. That would be really, really powerful if we could do that.
So
I agree with you. And it goes back to what you said, Matt, about the holistic. If you can say forest school is, has the opportunity to hit all five of those. And here's some examples of what you might see.
Yeah. So in terms of, I know that on the Nature Premium website, it talks about the percentage of particularly girls and the activity levels of girls within PE sessions. They're much more active at forest school sessions than they are in PE. We know that forest school is a very community-driven thing. So then there's that sort of civic and the conservation aspect and the linking side of things to our local community. There's a really interesting webinar that we did with the Breeze project, which was a forest school project up in Liverpool, I think. And that's in our back catalogue. So they did a data study on community-driven forest school. So that's another aspect of the enrichment that forest school hits. The citizenship, the broader life skills. It says about cooking and about design technology, extracurricular design technology, and debate, and all sorts of other, the things that crop up around our fire circle, discussions like that. And that's why I wanted to highlight the oracy framework as being something that is a way to hang on that learning that isn't necessarily written, that we're advocating. We're debating stuff, we're having deep conversations around the campfire that hits this, and this. So it is, the onus is on us to make those links, and it is on us to pull those bits together to advocate. Louise Ambrose did a really good webinar as well on advocacy. So that's on our back catalogue and free.
That would be good.
I
was thinking about the local government level as well, not just the head teachers, but with the the kind of the education committees at local councils, whether they're the people to be reaching out to as well. Yeah,
I mean, it's everyone and anyone, isn't it? We're really lucky that we have got a good ear in the government with Tim Farron, and he's doing a lot for outdoor learning and education, outdoor education in the wider sense. I know he's been very interested in what Liz Smith has been pushing through in Scotland, and I really urge you to look at what's going on in the Scottish Parliament about that, because for them, outdoor and nature and adventurous activity is a really big thing that is a buzzword at the moment. Not the funding. That's the thing, that the Scottish government have passed it, and now it's up to someone else to figure out how it's going to work funding wise. But yes. Jess, yes, I agree. Forest school should look to feature strongly under nature rather than being adventurous. Absolutely. So they're lumped together. That's the NOAA. And absolutely right. It is much more nature than, it's not PGL, it's not ropes. But it's not with PE and it's not with sport. So that is good. The FSA guide, it is available to members, and it's a guidance document on planning. It's brilliantly illustrated and written by Sarah Lawful and Lily Horseman, among others, I think, contributed to it. And that's been published by the FSA. It is on the website. There is a link to it, I believe, on the website, as long as you're a member. So if you're not a member, you can join, and then you'll be able to see it. And it is a really good advocate for SLTs. Quite a lot of people have said that one. The NOLA award might help gather. Yes, there are lots, actually. There are lots of different things cropping up at the moment. There's lots of research about different aspects of gathering data on outdoor learning. Perfect. Does anyone else have any other questions about this? I think I've gone through. I don't think I've missed anyone. No. Lovely. Well, I do recommend that you read these if you're working in mainstream education. Have a look through it, because it is an interesting read, even with the sort of the shifts that are happening inside the classroom, which might have a slight knock-on effect on people working outside the classroom. It's definitely an interesting time, and I'm, like I said, cautiously optimistic that the government are starting to understand what it is that we're doing, even if it be slightly misguided. At least we can correct them. And learning is all about making mistakes, isn't it? So we've got to start somewhere. Thank you, everyone, for coming along. Our next Wednesday webinar is on the 18th of March, I believe, and it is run by a lovely lady called Mary McLaughlin, who has done a couple of workshops at the roadshows, and she's doing it on resilience, I believe. So how are we resilient individuals? We have a big program of stuff coming up for this year, not only the in-person events, but our webinar series. So you will get much more information about that through our social media. But thank you very much for your time this evening. And hopefully I will see you at some point, either at a roadshow or at a conference or on Zoom.